In the wintertime, we didn't survive here for thousands upon thousands of years. I think they're estimating somewhere around 30,000 years now. That's the scientists. They slowly catch up to what we already know, is that we've always been here. But we didn't survive here for 30,000 years and not be a thriving community. People have this envisionment of us, freezing all winter long. Well, we wouldn't have survived if we didn't know how to live in the environment. And the reason why we lived in a longhouse or a nushquito is in the winter months is because it was a multifamily dwelling. And people think, that's weird. We lived very intergenerationally. We were also matrilineal, which means that you go by your maternal side of your family. So it was completely the opposite of Europeans. So think of it this way. In England in the 1600s, if the princess in England is being married, she marries the prince in France, and she has to go to France to, solidify the allegiance of these two countries and what have you. And she has to leave her family, and she leaves all her security. If everything's great, then great. But if it's not, she has no real recourse. It was the complete opposite thing for the Narragansett people. I can't speak for every single tribe across this nation, but I know many that were the same along the East Coast for sure. Matrilineal. So if I'll use myself, if I lived in the 1600s and I'm living with my parents in the winter months, because like I said, in the summer you had your own individual dwellings, but in the winter you did intergenerational. So my parents are in the dwelling, and I have a sister, and we'll pretend we have a brother too. So she and I would stay in with our parents. So when we're married, our spouses would come into that home as well, and our children. So in this case, I have 3 children and she has 7 children. So there'd be all those children, and people go, well, that's a lot and very weird. But these were very big. They were called what they were called nushquito or squishquito based off of how many fires were in it. So there were multiple fires, which is like central heating because they're, curved buildings. But it meant that when a hunting party, for example, men's roles were, it's not that women didn't hunt, but they didn't usually go off on a major hunting party. It's not that they couldn't, but it wasn't the usual role. So, it only makes sense if you have children, there's delineation of roles. And so if the women and, elder men and young boys are, and some adult men, of course, for the safety of the community, are in the village, but a hunting party goes off, or a scouting party, or there's someone that's called to council, or this thing or that thing that happens, and people leave the village, well, it isn't 2015 where you can take out your iPhone. Well, I forgot it's 2016 already, and call somebody. You had to socialize with the people in your home. If it's below 0, you're staying in your home. Well, the grandmother's there to teach children. The parents are there to teach children that, you don't go off to school. You learned in your home. If you were making clothes or mending things or preparing dinner, those things were all going on in the home. And so you were not isolated. This kept the community from being isolated. And of course, you have a whole village around you. And when the weather is nice enough, you go from house to house, if you will, just like anyone, and visit your neighbors and your family. But in the really deep winter, you had people within your home that were part of the team that was helping what you were doing. And also, when a woman in a Narragansett community wanted a divorce, all they had to do was put the man's bundle outside the door, and they were gone, because you have to see, she's in her household with her paternal family. Her aunties are living next door, her female cousins are next door, her siblings that are female are in the household, her married brothers, they're in another village because they go to their wife's village. And so it was a completely opposite set of ideologies. And I think that's a lot of why we had clashes, because we thought about the world completely different. I'm not saying one's good or bad. They were just completely different. So it's 2 different groups of people, not only trying to go across the barrier of language in general, that was completely different from each other. But the ideological differences were great. That went right into warfare. We had wars here. You know, we had enemies here. Different communities. I know that the Pequot were our historical enemies. And we had wars. But the way that we did war was really, really different. When the Pequot massacre happened at Fort Mystic, it was the first reality check for tribes here in New England, which of course were the first contact tribes in the Americas. So the idea that you went in and killed everybody, men, women, children, elders, and then burned the village was like so foreign. It was a completely opposite ideology that's how you conquer. Because we really weren't setting about to conquer. We were setting about to, you know, ensure our territories, ensure our waterways and the resources that were in our territories, but not, you had wars with the warriors. You didn't, you know, just slaughter a whole village. And so that was a completely different ideological shift when we realized what we were up against. And the massacre at Fort Mystic was the first real eye-opener to how that was going to play out.